In 1848, a railroad worker had an iron rod blasted straight through his skull. It entered below his cheek and shot out the top of his head. He didn't just survive. He stood up, spoke, and walked away. And what happened to him next would help launch the science of the human brain. His name was Phineas Gage, and by all accounts, he was a capable, well-liked young man, a foreman on a crew, blasting a path through rock for a new railroad line in Vermont. It was dangerous work. The process involved drilling holes into the rock, filling them with explosive powder, and using a long, heavy iron rod called a tamping iron to pack it all down before igniting the charge. Gage was good at his job. He was careful. But on one September afternoon, something went terribly wrong. In a momentary lapse, the powder ignited early. The explosion turned the tamping iron, over a meter long and more than 3 centimeters thick, into a spear. It rocketed upward, entered Gage's skull beneath his left cheekbone, passed behind his eye, tore through the front of his brain, and burst out through the top of his head, landing dozens of feet away. By every expectation of the time, he should have died instantly. He didn't. What happened next stunned everyone. Gage was thrown onto his back, but within moments, he spoke. He was helped to a cart, sat upright for the ride into town, and reportedly walked up a flight of stairs to see the doctor with only a little assistance. When the physician arrived, Gage was calm and lucid enough to describe exactly what had happened. Astonishingly, he survived the following weeks, even fighting off a serious infection, and eventually recovered physically. The whole medical world was amazed, but the real story was only beginning. Because, according to the accounts that followed, Gage was not quite the same person. Before the accident, he'd been described as responsible, capable, and even tempered. Afterward, some who knew him claimed his personality had shifted, that he'd become impulsive, unreliable, and prone to outbursts, so changed that friends reportedly said he was no longer Gage. The part of his brain the rod destroyed, the frontal lobe, seemed to be tied to something profound: his self-control, his judgment, his very character. But here's where we have to be careful. Over the years, Gage's story was told and retold, and the changes to his personality were often wildly exaggerated to make a dramatic point. Modern researchers who've dug into the original records suggest the reality was more nuanced, that Gage may have adapted and recovered far more than the legend admits, eventually holding down steady work as a stagecoach driver. The truth is, we have surprisingly little reliable detail. His case became almost a blank slate onto which people projected their theories. Even with the myths stripped away, Gage's importance is enormous. His case was one of the first real clues that specific parts of the brain are responsible for specific aspects of who we are. That personality and reasoning aren't some mysterious spirit, but are rooted in physical tissue you can point to. It helped plant the seed for modern neuroscience, and for the idea that damaging one region of the brain can change the mind itself in specific, predictable ways. Phineas Gage lived for another 12 years after an iron rod passed through his brain. His skull and that very rod are still preserved today. And though much of his story is tangled in legend, one truth remains solid. A terrible accident on a railroad in Vermont helped humanity begin to understand its own mind.